Room, the only way to start your day.
You're grounded. If you and grounding takes time, takes time from experience to learnings to a lot of things and support. So if you're really grounded, whether it's an institution or a person, no amount of distractions, which for me is the wind, that's going to get you off course.
Mm-hmm. How would you interpret that?
Oh, I think it is something whereby you yourself, you manage yourself strong, and you put some mechanism to defend what you are doing. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. To keep yourself strong, essentially, foundations matter. So let's interrogate this issue a little bit, shall we? Gender-based violence. For the longest time, maybe it wasn't even called gender-based violence. We talked about assault and things like that, and then the words changed over time. And it's not just women in relationships being beaten or being assaulted or being raped. And now it's men and it's boys. So it's girls, it's boys, it's men, it's women. But gender-based violence is still a big issue. Let's take an outlook over it for now, Alberta. And what are we looking at with the organization that you work with in terms of an outlook over GBV? Is it better or worse?
I'd say it's worse. I'd say it's worse. Where we've been in existence for 24 years. Looking back and just to also start with how then the definitions have changed, so to speak, because of better understanding. I would say maybe better understanding and the emerging trends is that the first, when GVRC started, actually it wasn't that. It was just Nairobi Women's Hospital thinking would get rape cases, and only rape cases is what they thought would happen, and offer free support. Then, of course, over the years, the number kept rising. So why I say it's gotten worse is that just last year, from April 2024 to March 2025, we supported over 3,464 survivors of gender-based violence. And that's like when there's no social disruption, when there's stability, there's no elections, there's no COVID, and so forth. And this has been like consistent over the years, despite GVRC now growing into 8 gender-based violence centers and setting up other 13 gender-based violence centers in county government hospitals, and also then having other hospitals providing the support. So I would expect that the numbers would be less. Again, when you go to studies and when you go for community awareness, you realize then that there's a lot of underreporting, because then for many reasons, you want to keep the family name, or people do not understand what gender-based violence is, or you don't know the reporting mechanisms, or you fear intimidation. For many reasons, it's not reported. So, for example, including femicide, which is not currently defined in law. Yeah. So for me, it's getting worse. It's keeping on changing how it looks, so to speak. It keeps on getting systemic. So I'll give you an example. Emerging trends now, we're talking about femicide in the last 2 years. When you talk about technologically facilitated gender-based violence, so something that we spoke about, in the last few years, but now we are very keen on that. So it keeps changing how it presents itself. The other thing why I say it's getting worse is because it's not, hardly would you suffer one form of gender-based violence, and we don't look at it that way. So I'll give you an example of child marriage. In some communities, by the time that child is married, she's undergone female genital mutilation. She's getting married, she's denied education. She's getting married, she's a child, so there's defilement every other day. There's no marriage there. That's defilement. She starts having a baby, let's say at 11. We had an 11-year-old giving birth at our facility. She's getting obstetric trauma. She's bringing up kids. She has no right to her reproductive rights. She's bringing up kids, so she's learning her reproductive rights and all it entails, actually from the husband who's 70. Maybe she's a third wife. She's not able to give proper nutrition, for example, to her child, and becomes a cycle. And you've met 25-year-old grandmothers. So again, that ties up with maybe economic empowerment, opportunities. So just to mention that it's deeper than we think, and that's why there's very minimal reporting. Yes.
And is it as prevalent? Because, when we hear these things, we are met with shock and we say, not possible, that maybe these things happened before. It's not possible that it's still happening in 2025. And we say, no, maybe those are things gone. That a 25-year-old grandmother, maybe we heard that in 1990 and, people have, come to terms with that. We can't do that anymore and that we've left it behind. No?
It is so there. It is so there in all our spaces, even in our workspaces. It's just that there are power relation issues, or we will not. Even sexual harassment is a form of gender-based violence. So it's there, and it's in there in all classes, so to speak, and all areas. Just 2 months ago. Actually, let me start with 2 weeks ago, I was in Busia and we had a session I was facilitating with the security team and the technical working group, or rather the GBV players. They shared about a girl who was gang raped and got a plastic bottle inserted in her. She was not able to get the support from the Busia County Hospital, and she had to be taken to another referral hospital to be able to get that support. To go there, she had to be put in a police vehicle on the floor. That's where she was lying. So fast forward, she was treated, she was brought back to the center. She was, I think a week or so after that, released. She was gang raped again. Inserted now a glass bottle and is now dead. So to show you the reality as at now. That same time I was there, the next day, I attended the funeral of Susan Nabwire, who had been asked, by their husband, who cut her, chopped her, called the house help. In the middle of that, so the house help held the baby so that nothing happens to her. She was slapped, the baby fell, she was raped and told to clean the blood of the lady who just been killed. So just to show you the reality as at now, I was in West Pokot, so I'm not going to tell you stories, things that I have seen. I was in West Pokot like a month or so back. I sat under a tree and this particular shelter home that also provides education. And they said, okay, how many girls would you want to speak to? I'm like, okay, just 5 girls to share their experiences in confidence so that I can understand the programming. And they came like 100 of them and they all want to share their stories. 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds who've just escaped from child marriage.
What's happening to them?
They've been forced by their fathers and their brothers and forced into marriage, and things like that. So they've been rescued, they've run away from their marriages, and now they're there for education. So yes, it happens. Yesterday, I was in one of our facilities, 3-year-old admitted with convulsion, beaten by, the mother and the stepfather. So yes, it is happening.
I'm curious to know, because the stories are so horrific. You can't even imagine that a human being can even think and process to do that kind of harm and damage, or even kill. I'm just wondering, because the cases are so varied, like you've just said, and these are different parts of the country where you're getting all these examples from, unfortunately. But what are the overriding factors? Because you're saying the numbers are increasing, and you would assume that yesteryears it was just cultural conversations, that people need to be educated, people need to be informed, people need to be exposed. And we live in an age right now where a grandmother has access to social media. They have access to all this information. They will know what's happening in Nairobi, in Teso. And you would assume that there's such an awareness around these things, but the numbers are still going up. And it cuts across whether it's urban or rural in this case. So what are the overriding factors that are leading to this vicious violence?
I'd say contributing factors. So one of them, I'd say economic empowerment. So for me, then there are excuses, and let me put that disclaimer. And I mentioned earlier that they're systemic. I would say maybe patriarchy, gender inequalities, so to speak, that, and gender imbalances or power imbalances. Sorry to say that. So some of them are culturally entrenched. So, for example, child marriages, the female genital mutilation. And as you rightfully say that there's technology, you expect people then to be elite and to understand. You'd be shocked that even those who are exposed, let me call it exposed, we have ladies that are brought from the UK who come and get circumcised in Kenya. you know. So you have the same professors who would take their children for medicalized female genital mutilation. You have the same, as you rightfully said, cuts across who would abuse. So for me, it's a lot of contributing factors. So, for example, economic empowerment, pressures, you know, some of them we wrongly interpret, for example, religion, and say, oh, the wife should be submissive. Yes, the husband should be the head. I was just in church, attended mass on Sunday at 7 a.m. I won't tell you which church. And the priest kept saying how the women are sinners. Or you two women who've just said the first and the second reading, here with beautiful voices, you're out here, you know, doing all these sins, you're wearing 2 rosaries. And he really put the women down. And I was shocked because church is for sinners, if you ask me. Yeah. So I'm trying to let you know that it's very systemic. It's in the media. I'll give you an example. In the advertisement, you're advertising a car, you're putting a woman half naked. You're advertising a car, not a woman. You know, and we don't realize it. The songs we watch, the exposure kids have, for example, to technology, what is it that they're seeing? You know, and someone mentioned, and maybe you also know, adolescent, for example, in Netflix is a good example on how we can see a lot of these things happening. When we say, and I won't talk for men, but when you talk about, and we also work with boys, and 10% of our survivors are actually boys, that's approximately 400 in 1 year. So when you're having boys, for example, and ask myself, okay, when do men organize to mentor these boys? And there's a conversation now about men not stepping up, wamezoea kuwekwa, and things like that. That's what's happening in society, yeah? Not being the priests, not being the provider. So there's all this pressure and confusion about modernization, and so to speak. Even when you talk about the teens, and they use, what information are they getting from the media, for example, or the social media? Because we're absent. I was here, I had to leave my house at 7, and that was even late to be here. I'll be home maybe much later. We're chasing the bag. But who's there to bring these social norms and family values and proper values to my kids? We're all working. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Daniel.
Yes.
We've just painted a picture of what the situation is like. You know, the problems still continue, even to those who are exposed. These are the numbers that we have. This is the situation on ground. We cannot bury our heads in the sand and say, it has not happened to me, so I don't know, I don't care. What do you see in your space? Just how crazy is it, so that people understand what it is you're talking about, so that when you are a lifeguard going out there to meet the victims, what do you see and how bad is the situation?
I think, to me, as lifeguard Kenya, we deal with the child protection and gender-based violence. Now, men, they are lacking information because of ego. Hawako tayari kuenda kuripoti na kuongea wazi, kwa sababu unasapata mwanaume anaumia kwa nyumba na anasema wacha tu nivumilie.
Anaumia kwa njia gani?
Mambo ya domestic violence inaanzia mambo ya pengine ni kitanda, pengine ni chakula, pengine ni fedha. So mwanaume akikuja akiambiwa, nao wewe mbona huja provide, kuna ile lugha ya kuongea wa mama wetu ama mabibi zetu wanazungumza wakati umekosa hata kuelewa. Pengine wewe ni mtu unakunywa, ukitoka umepewa na rafiki yako kapombe, ukirudi kwa nyumba unaulizwa, hii pesa umekunywa umetoa wapi? Ulikuwa na wanawake na wewe hujaleta pesa. So ulikuwa unakunywa na wanawake wako. Unaona already hiyo ni abuse kwa mwanaume. But hata ongea, hata nyamaza. But wakati atamuka anasafanya kitendo. Na also pia kwa zile organization yenye inatetea haki ya kibinadamu, unapata wanatetea girl child than boy child. So unapata boy child ananga empowerment yenye amepewa kwa society, because hata akienda kwa polisi hakuna friendly space for boy child to report the problem yenye wanapitia. Because akienda kwa police station atajipata, wewe mwanaume umekuja kufanya nini? Tangu lini mwanamke amechapa mwanaume, you know? So huyo mwanaume anakuwa very shy kuongea mambo yenye inatendeka. So ndio mwanaume aongee, maybe atapiga ama ataua. Unaona sasa hapo amefika mwisho yenye ana kickback.
Okay.
Yes, so but I think it is ni lack awareness in the society. We need more awareness and peer friendly center yenye friendly with men, because men hawana center yenye wanaweza report.
Unaona kama kuna center kama hiyo, unaona kama wanaume watakubali kuanza kuongea mambo ya ile inamsumbua ama kitu kama hiyo, unaona kama watakubali?
Yes, watakubali kwa sababu at my center I have many of them.
Okay.
Yes. They are coming, we discuss.
Wanasema kwa nini wanachapa, ama kwa nini hiyo hasira imekuwa tu mingi sana, anaweza chapa mtu mpaka aumie?
Wana open up, wanasema maybe wanawake wetu kulingana na zile uchumi iko, wanasema wanawake wetu hawaelewi kwa sababu unasapata maybe mambo ni wamekosana kidogo.
Yes.
Siku hizi unapata wamama ama wasichana wanaenda kwa ofisi ya watoto. Ile mambo ingesuluhishwa nyumbani.
Yes.
Wanakimbilia kwa wapi? Ofisi ya watoto, kwamba huyu mwanaume anataka provide nini? Provide upkeep ya watoto. But unaona sasa huyu mwanaume anabaki ameumia, kuna mali atafanya nini? Ataenda, because pale itaangaliwa best interest of the child. Nani alitangulia ku report? Ni mama alireport kwamba mwanaume achukue upkeep. Na pengine huyu mwanaume hana uwezo ya kuchunga jamii yake kulingana na kisheria. So unapata mambo yake sasa yeye amenyamaza nayo. Hawezi zungumza kwamba ninaumia. Pengine hata wanaume wengi hata mambo ya kitanda unapata mama wakati bwana haja provide kitu, mwanaume amevaa majins, amefunga zip, ile right yake ya kitanda hapati sawa. Hizo zote pia ni dhuluma kwa mwanaume.
Ni abuse.
Yes. So unapata mwanaume huyu anakaa na hizo mambo kwa roho.
Na hizo mambo kikanazo ndio zina, because we're talking about violence, kuna ile dhana kuwa pia kuna wanaume wanachapwa na wake zao. I don't know whether you've handled ripoti kama hizo.
Yes.
Where now kando na emotional abuse na hiyo matusi yote, then inafika ile kiwango sasa either bibi ana organize ama ni yeye mwenyewe anachapa mwanaume, na mwanaume hana mahali pa kwenda kuripoti. Umehandle cases kama hizo?
Ziko mingi sana kwa sababu unapata mwanaume amekuja labda amechelewa, sana mambo ya mpira, mtu anachelewa mpaka saa 6 usiku,
na hiyo kitu Man U, Arsenal.
So amewacha jamii yake, pengine alisahau hata hakupeana pesa. So wakati anarudi kwa nyumba things itakuwa the same vile aliacha, vita itaanzia pale. Na unapata kuna wale wanawake wameenda gym, wanainua mwanaume kuinua.
Okay.
Aitwa Weida.
Yes.
So anachapa
mwanaume mpaka anafukuza. Na at the same time yeye ndiye anapiga nduru. So wakati anapiga nduru, majirani wanafikiria
mama amebeba mwanaume alafu yeye
ndiye anapiga nduru tena.
Okay.
So watu majirani wakitokea wanafikiria labda ni mwanaume anachapa, ni mwanamke anachapa. Kumbe
ni mwanaume anachapa. Lakini wakati mwanaume amechapwa, yeye hawezi ongea because anaogopa pia uoga, aibu kujitokeza kwamba mimi nimechapwa na nani? Bibi yangu.
Na bibi yangu. So hata pia anaenda ananyamaza.
Okay, so listening to what Dan is saying, Alberta, and I'm listening to some of the horrific things. You also need to see someone, because I can't imagine. Do you? I hope so. The anger that he's speaking of, and I think about that, those are where interventions, also like he said, that people can actually sit down and have a conversation about the thing that's bothering you inside. I fail to reconcile, however, with this violence that will beat somebody and abuse her and insert foreign objects and be so violent. That is not a conversation that can be had with somebody in terms of what has angered you or how can we. And if we are seeing more and more cases of this, then it seems to point to something fundamentally off in society that would mete out such violence on somebody else. I've seen the horrific pictures of this baby meted out on her by her father and stepmother, and that's not a conversation that you can have with somebody and ask you, what made you angry to want to almost kill a 3-year-old child? What's going on there? Okay,
so let me start with this. I also see a therapist, and so do my colleagues. I mean, it's too much. It's too heavy, and you see them raw, very raw. So, and yes, caregivers also get a lot of secondary trauma, and there's also transference where you'd see your own baby and start imagining the same things happening to them. So, to your question, you asked what's going on. I think that's what you asked. What's going on is a bitter society, if you ask me. What's going on, and talking to different people sometimes, and I must mention that 90% of the cases, according to the Kenya Demographic Health Survey and also to GBV, is women and girls who are the alleged, who are the survivors of gender-based violence. And that's why a lot of focus is supporting the women and girls, not to mean that men and boys should not have inclusion. So I find that there's a lot of backlash. I'll start with that, especially this issue of women being economically empowered. So how our parents lived, our moms were not bringing equal, bread to the table or even more. And I find that men do not know how to deal with this woman who's not going to be home and doing the societal expectation, gender roles, and things like that. So that's one of the backlashes that I hear people talking about. What my peer here spoke about men is we are also, let's start also from socialization. And I think that's where the problem also is. When we tell the men that you should not cry, the young boys when they're growing up, when when the girls and boys, it's your children and they come home and one has to do homework, the other one has to do housework first and then the homework, the toys that we buy for them and all that. That's where, for me, all the problem starts. When I was listening to him speak, and I think one of the other things then that we miss is creating safe spaces even for men to discuss, when there's non-judgmental, when it's them, because it's them who need to have their own spaces and say, these are the needs that we have and this is how we can address them. And a lot of times when we say, the response mechanisms are not friendly to men, are not friendly to boys, as much as I try and as much as my organization will try, and yes, I have male colleagues who will provide that support, where it's me and my space, I'll be biased. I'll be biased unconsciously so. So for me, that's what is missing. That mentorship,
Sure.
For men and all those things.
I can see that. I can see how we have compounded this in society where we say for some reason that it's okay for boys to want to grow up tough and then they shouldn't have to have a conversation. Be tough, don't cry, that kind of thing. I can see the danger that will pose for men later on in life. That unfortunately then we have what I have now most recently coined emotional dwarfism, that you're then not able to deal with that, and that what happens later is a physical manifestation of a historical suppression of issues. But I have a problem, Alberta, with this baby, this picture. We can't show it now because obviously it's too disturbing.
Yes.
I have a problem that violence has been met out on a young girl by a man and a woman.
Yes.
I have a problem. You said yourself, you've gone to see 5 girls. 100 showed up.
Yeah.
About the things that are being done to them. About this girl who's been raped and then raped again by not 1, 2, or 3 different people. There is something that is very wrong, whereby that kind of violence is either passing a message or displaying an element of control that we are not dealing with.
Exactly.
What is that?
I still need to put my finger on that. But I think one of the biggest problem is we tend to assume that it's out there. We tend to assume that we are not the perpetrators. We tend to assume that I am not suffering violence in my home, for example. So I would wake up, wear makeup, and show up here and continue. So we are not facing the issue. And there's a cycle of violence. By the time a woman is chopped off her hands, because those are the things we've seen. A man is chopped off his penis by the wife. You're burnt by oil by your partner. Those are the real cases. It's a whole cycle of violence. You're not able to sit. You're not able to have a conversation. And that's the problem I have. 2, we are not respecting each other as human beings. It's the simple things. It's the simple things that and I'll keep making reference to when we were growing up. It's the simple things that I will be in a public transport, I'm a child, and I will stand up for this adult. It's the simple things that I will misbehave and my neighbor will beat me up. So there's no respect. There's no mutual respect. Then it tends to seem that it's a gender inequality. It's like a fight between genders and things like that. And it's not a respect for human rights. My biggest problem then again is we are not holding people accountable. We're letting people be. So out of the 3,464 I mentioned, you can imagine that GVRC only provided expert medical testimony in court for only about 575.
Just for purposes of clarification, GVRC is a Gender Violence Recovery Center.
Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. It's okay.
Yes, the Gender Violence Recovery Center of Nairobi Women's Hospital. So that's like what? That's like a sixth. So that shows you that we have normalized violence. That's where also the problem is. We are very okay not reporting. We are very okay. And there are many other reasons why people don't report. And even those expert medical testimonies that were done in court, how many reached conviction? And how long does it take? Am I making sense? So you can get away with it. Even us as a community, we are bystanders. We know that our neighbor is being beaten. There was a story in Kasarani where, that's how she screams every night. And this particular night she screamed and all that, and she was killed. And the neighbors were like, or someone is being beaten, you're just taking a photo. Or we know Albata has a black eye in a family meeting and we're just like, we don't talk about it. So those are some of the reasons why the violence has kept on escalating and we don't want to talk about it. Because a lot of the perpetrators, actually about 68%, are known and mentioned by the survivor.
When you talk about these the perpetrators being known and mentioned, I remember there's a time we did something in Kawangware. I think it was last year. And from that meeting, there's this gentleman who asked for my number and later called me and told me, I'm going through something in my house. I'm no longer able to provide, and the person I'm living with is taking advantage. They're beating me up, because I'm in Iweka. All I want is to get out, because if it does continue, I'm afraid my emotions will get better part of me and I might end up doing something really bad. All he wanted was 2,000 shillings to leave Nairobi, go back to his parents. And I provided that for him and he left. But this is a man who, in that surrounding, did not know where to go until when he attended that meeting that we had and he was able to speak up. But this is a situation where, Daniel, men now want a safe space to speak, but they don't know how to start. Because then again, for a man to just wake up, and especially coming from a background where, men do not cry. You are the provider. You're not supposed to share what it is you're going through. Always find a way of going through it. A bad way of looking at things. But how are we changing the conversation such that men are able to open up and be able to get the assistance that they do need?
First thing, ile kitu nasema ni kwamba wanaume tukicreate awareness, wajue kwamba pia hawa kuna wale wasaidia kutoka kwa ile dhuluma yenye wanapitia. Itasaidia wanaume watatoka na wataenda kuripoti hizo cases, because unapata kama mwanaume wengi sana they trusted the police, but wakienda kwa polisi pia ile maswali wanaulizwa inawakera. Sasa wanaondoka kwa polisi, sasa wanakosa pale pa kuenda. But kama tunasapata those centers, friendly centers for them, then we create awareness, tuwaeleze vile watareport na nani atareport, watatoka, watasaidika. I think hiyo itasaidia, because wanaume wengi wanaingia kwa drugs, wanaingia addicted kwa pombe, wanaingia hata kufanya vitu zingine yenye haifai kwa sababu ya stress yenye wanapitia kwa manyumba. So at least ukiweka safe space for them, they can come and report those cases. Then we can use even our referral pathway to help them. Yes.
But a lot of these cases, the first point of contact is the justice system before even going to get help. Whether it's a case, it's a woman, the first point is you want to report. And I think there's something really broken in our society. I remember last year, there was a time I was at, I'll not mention the name of this police station, I was going to see this OCS, and we were having a conversation with him. Then I happened to stand where the reporting desk. So I was waiting for him to finish something I was doing. So nimesimama tu hivi kwa corridor namgoja. Then a man walked in. His left ear, this whole part, haikukua, he's bleeding to his shoulder, his shirt. So akakuja, so I was curious, what case is this? Akaanza kureport. Akasema ni bibi yake amemuuma sikio. A young man. So kulikuwa na, there were 4 police officers. 3 were men, 1 was a lady behind the bars. So and they were using the digital system. So they were they had this tablet. They had to type key in, and it took a lot. The entire time I was there was around 25 minutes. They were not past the first paragraph, and the reason is the first askari alimuuliza wewe nini nimekuleta hapa? Ati nimekuja kuripoti kesi. Unaona vile amenifanya. Nani amefanya? Bibi yangu ameniuma masikio. The other officer akaanza kumuuliza wewe sasa bibi yako alifika aje kwa hiyo masikio kauma hivyo? So the man ended up being victimized. The other one was laughing. Anasema sasa wewe hii siku pia kuna wanaume wanapigwa na mabibi zao. Si ungetoka hiyo nyumba utafute bibi nyingine, wasichana wamejaa huko nje. And I'm there listening. Yeah. I had a cape, they didn't know it was me standing there. I'm just listening to how this man is being vilified and he's reporting a case and he's bleeding. So there's no first aid first. They stop the bleeding because it's still fresh. The wound is still fresh. A piece of the ear imetolewa kabisa. So the lady akaanza kumuuliza, so hiyo masikio hiyo ingine imeenda wapi? Exhibit imeenda wapi? Imagine, they are making fun of this young man. Exhibit imeenda wapi? The man was so disoriented and they have not started. By the time I was leaving, I later asked the OCS what I had witnessed. Of course, he took some action, but it paints the picture of, and this is not just men, even women. We had a case here of a young girl who was abused through so many families. And when she was going to report, she's actually being questioned. Are you sure how wanaume they raped you? Ama wewe ndio ulijipeana? So my question is, as much as we're coming up with these centers, and a lot of these centers, I don't know, I stand to be corrected, they're like recovery centers where you're going to get help. But our justice system, the first point of contact where you're reporting an abuse or violence, whether it's a man, and in the case of the example I've given, a man, or in other cases, women, how are we socializing, for example, police officers in understanding the sensitivities around, and mwanaume, as he's giving this testimony, there are others who are coming to report cases. Yes. There are 2 people been arrested, they are coming, so all of us are listening to this man telling the story, vile bibi yake amemuma masikio. Alberta, does it, at what point do we start having a deeper conversation around how we're even reporting these cases? Because we see very, very few prosecutions around gender-based violence cases.
Well, I agree with you. And
I know it's heavy.
Yeah, let me even make it worse. Again, of the 3,464 cases we saw that year, you won't believe that 2,593 were actually referred by the police to us. But remember, so that's like a big chunk, Yeah. But remember, the ones that went now to the access to justice system, now the ones that it's not even getting into the system, the ones we provided out of those expert medical testimony in court are only about 575. So that tells a lot from what you're saying. Actually, it's
only
what you're
500.
Saying. Only 575. And the suspect to conviction to be way less. Yeah. So just to confirm what you're saying, so there's that issue of victim blaming, and not just from the police, actually even from our own families and our own spaces. Yes, because this police and ourselves here and everyone else, we're from that same home and those same societies. So it's a whole community mindset and awareness, that needs to be created and sensitization. That man was very bold. I don't think he'll even come back to follow up on that case. First, everything there was wrong. From he's supposed to have been referred to a hospital first for medical treatment. Then all those other writings later. Even him sharing what his experience should not have been in public like that. Should have been in a private space. So ametoka hapo, kila mtu anamcheka, na even you're not supposed to have known what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to even create a safe space for him to be able to say. The other reason why we are having, when you're talking about the problem with access to justice, there's a lot of burden of proof on the victim. So amekuja amekatwa masikio, but you're asking where the other piece is. How will I start looking for another piece to prove that, and that's why a lot of people don't follow through. And that's the problem. Again, the cost of the legal proceedings, the cost of even going for service from one place to another. So when do we need to start these serious conversations like yesterday? I'd say in all spaces. So the police, for example, this year, GBV trained and sensitized on reporting investigation to about 360 police officers from 21 counties. But that's us. Everyone needs to take the forefront from their own space, so to speak. So if it's training curriculums within the police force, if it's sensitizing them, there should be no excuse. The police should be the first place that we all run to for safety, so to speak. So what human rights organization are pushing for in Kenya is actually a unit for gender-based violence. Yesterday, someone sent me something on TikTok about a lady who had been, I don't know if you saw it, and she was talking about how difficult it was to get someone arrested. She had been beaten the whole night, and a similar situation that you're talking about. And she said, you know what? I was asked to provide 3,000 to get the person arrested. And she was like, where do I even get 3,000? I need to look for money for treatment and things like that. So for me, that's the problem. We need to have, the same way we have units for what? If a bank is robbed in less than 2 minutes, I guess cops will be there. But what if a man is raped? It's called raped in law. What if a man is beaten? What if a woman is beaten, a child? You have to figure it out. And that's where the problem is, taking the seriousness of it. If it's those conversations, it's in every space, whether it's the teachers, whether it's us as parents, so for me, if you'd ask me, it's actually a national disaster. Everyone should be talking about it, and I'm glad, yes, the president did set up the technical working group on gender-based violence, including femicide. So seeing also the end to it and the interventions around it.
But are we though? This is the thing. Are we,
not.
as a result of that task force, actually seeing something being done?
So if
what we understand is that there were counties where there was a tent set up and then people came and, had a meeting or two or whatever is happening. But the devastation, and I think maybe we don't realize when we set up these task forces, please help us understand, we don't realize the devastation that an act on a night has on the rest of a life of an individual,
yes,
or a day.
Yes.
That life essentially is altered forever and permanently because of that thing.
Exactly.
So we trivialize it and say, well, let's put up a tent and have some people come and sit around and talk about it. But these are lives that are being affected. And then we wonder why we have people operating the way they do in society later. We are diseased. Do we understand when we set up these task forces, when we slap a lot of NGOs speak around it, when we say, okay, yes, well, we've set up a committee and a task force, that's just all we've done. We've not dealt with the problem. I agree.
So this task force is yet to present the report to the president. And hopefully when they do, the actions after we'll all take our responsibility and take action for it. And for me, that's just... I don't know what to say, but I'm just thinking, if we just saw the other person as a human being, we would not even have gender-based violence, so to speak. And to be able to end this, it has to be everyone. We have to be responsive and we have to be sensitive. Yeah, we really have to be sensitive, and we need to also understand what is gender-based violence. The other problem then has been that this violence happens in our spaces, but in some communities and even ourselves, we don't realize that we're being violated.
Do you think that it happens? Because the things that you talk about, the things that you see, the cases that come to you, Dan, the cases that come to you, Alberto, the ones that you go to see, they seem to have become worse, they become worse, they've become more violent, even more daring in terms of how far you can push the envelope. What can you actually do to this individual? And do you think they get worse or more serious because really nothing is done about them?
That's exactly what I think. The other lady who was killed in Kitale, where the man even, alidungwa makisu kwa uso, and the man was like, hakuna pali utanipeleka, right after that. That's my problem. We have to hold people to account. And the other day, someone was telling me, some lady were having a conversation, was telling me, you know what, put them in the public square, that town square. Come to hapo kata shingo. Trust me, it will stop.
Okari will agree with you.
Yeah.
I support that
because
100%.
why are we sitting here discussing this?
Yeah.
But Alberta, this is for you and also for Daniel here. Is it that it's just a follow-up to what Nund was just asked? And sometimes I wonder, the more you interact with people around the social spaces and the stories and the images and the video clips that you keep seeing of violence, is it a case of there's an increase of violence and the numbers are going up, or this thing has always been there, it's only that we are now reporting it more and more every day? I'll start with you, Bonadan.
I think social media imetusaidia at least kujua mambo mengi, kwa sababu mbeleni hatukuwa tunaelewa mambo mengi kulingana vile zinafanyika. But another thing pia, kuna sehemu nyingi sana Kenya hawajakuwa access kwa social media. So unreported cases bado ni mingi sana. And also unapata hii ndio Kenya yenye unaona mwenzako anauliwa na unachukua video. Yani badala usaidie huyo mtu, wewe unachukua video. So hiyo video umemsaidia, itasaidia aje na already amekufa. So unaona kitu kama hiyo. So at least pia hata kama tunachukua video, angalia maslahi ya huyo mtu mwenye anapigwa vipi. Unafurahia wakati unachukua video, ama what you want to do with this video after the death of this person. So pia also tungependa create awareness, because tukicreate awareness watu wataelewa jinsi ya kuripoti hizi maneno.
Watu wanaelewa hiyo asira uko nayo kwa roho. Watu wanaelewa kama hiyo asira inaweza leta kitu mbaya mbeleni ukiitumia vibaya. Watu wanaelewa hiyo kweli, ama wanasema ni asira tu itapita?
No.
Do they understand the connection between that?
Watu waelewi. Unajua, I think kwa wanawake asira yao ni nyepesi kujua, lakini kwa mwanaume kitambi toke, at least atakuwa amefanya action something. Naona. But unaona, for example, nowadays unapata kitambo, unapata wamama ndio walikuwa natoroka manyumba, lakini siku hizi unapata mwanaume anatoka na sati yake moja, ameenda. Itakuja kujulikana after 1 to 2 months kwamba mwanaume na alitoka ni kama anaenda kazi na ameenda na ameenda amepotea. Na ameacha familia yake hivyo hivyo tu.
Daniel, I hear where you're coming from, but then again, one would argue that because we've seen such things happen before. I'll give you an example of the case that we saw in Mombasa of that gentleman who was being sodomized in the open and cameras all over the place, and nothing up to date. One would say nothing really happened, and you find others would pick up on these and say, like Ndu was saying, I will do it. Hakuna mahali utanipeleka. Kama ni polisi, I know someone in the police. So if you look at the way these stories these matters are being handled in terms of prosecutions, out of 3,000, talking about 500 that have ended up in court, but even then, how many have gone all the way? We're talking about less than 100. So how is this then making the situation worse in terms of perpetrators knowing at the end of the day nothing will be done? Albert.
Yeah. So we all have to up our game. We all have, and for me, access to justice is not the problem. It's not just at the courts. It starts also with the community. Because the community also would be where you're going to report you're messing with the family name, and things like that. For that community to also know that I can support this person, and they need to report, for example, within 72 hours for us to be able to get the evidence. And even those places, for us to know where is it that we are reporting to. The awareness he was talking about. Are there numbers I can call? Are there people who can come and rescue me? I don't need to shower, for example, when I'm raped. And when I go to that health facility, they also know how to collect the evidence and store, and the chain of custody, and passing the same to for example, the police. Then at the police, not to get the treatment, that Dennis was talking about, that survivors are getting. And then from there also how the investigations are done. A lot of cases also thrown out because of that investigation. So for example, forensic labs in Kenya, like what? I think 2 or 3 government ones, and the backlog is way back. When you take your sample, or we have to wait for many more because reagent akuna and things like that. So then there's also a problem with that, yeah? So it's the whole, and even when you report as a survivor, okay, fine, you've gotten treated. So where do you go to? Is there a safe house? Is that community? The cost of it, the cost of reporting, the cost of moving from one service point to another. That's where most of them will go for medical treatment, and that's it. And that's why, again, they're not going to go and report emotional abuse, for example. They'll report when it's severe cases, the ones Ndu is talking about. So all these things contribute to this access to justice. The court has also tried, let's agree, that they've set up 14 specialized GBV courts across the country. And I know they have that access to justice week where they fast track the cases. So again, now going back also and saying your question to what Okari was asking about, whether is the reporting more and is it more severe and things like that. So a gap that we have is also on research. Research and really interrogating these questions. So that's a gap in the country, including data management, having a central depository for data and being able to analyze that, so that then you can say these ones that are being reported at GVRC and the ones are reported at the police crime report, for example, is it double counting? And those who go to the shelter, is this same person? Is this same person able to access all these services? And why do they drop off? So I'll shock you that the statistics we have as GVRC is way higher than the National Police Crime Report.
Wow.
Yeah? So that's also another gap in the country. So when you ask, is it under-reporting? Is it that more cases are up? Are they... We don't know. Maybe now, because of this awareness that continues to happen, people are more aware, and I know this is violence and this is where I can go report. The question is, are the response mechanism also friendly and responsive? Yeah, so that then I can keep responding. And that's why you're talking about, you spoke of a case that happened and nothing has happened so far, the Mombasa case. So it was on social media. We were quotes and using a bad word, excited about it and made a fuss about it. But what happened after that? What really happened? The girl I gave an example who was gang raped, left hospital, gang raped again, and died. So someone is trying to show you, you know what? I'm back.
Still do again
and
let me ask this question about restoration very quickly, and I'll start with you, Dan. Tutazungumza about justice for survivors. How do we also rehabilitate the offenders? Because this is case by case. There are those cases you look at, unasema mwanaume ametoka kwa nyumba, ako na hasira, amerudi jioni, bibi ameongea hivi, hukuleta pesa, hukufanya hivi, watoto hukufanya hivi. Then from hiyo hasira, he decides to beat the wife, for example. And maybe it's not something amekuwa akifanya previously. But how do we then make sure that huyu mwanamke amepata justice, but also this man is rehabilitated, there is restoration? How do we do that?
I think hapo ndio unaona koti zetu za Kenya ilileta mambo ya mediation and reconciliation. After I think mtu maybe kuna kifungo ya nje kulingana na ile kitendo amefanya, ama kuna kifungo ya ndani. Pengine akitoka pale ndani, I feel the system inafaa ikuwe kwamba akifika pale iwekwe something like, because bado ni watoto, bado ni baba ya wale watoto. As much as kulikuwa ABCD, bado kuna watoto pale wanamuhitaji. So I think inafaa iwekwe a place where kuna mali wanasakwa wafanye reconciliation ama mediation ili warudiane pamoja wale watoto wao.
Well, if anything, this conversation shows us is that there is a lot of work to do, and that there are fundamental fact-finding that needs to happen. It's a tough one to have to deal with, but it's in our society. I mean, the work that you both do is thankless to an extent, but necessary, isn't it? And this is the society that we live in, but we need to make it better. We can. Daniel Odongo is the founder at Lifeguard Kenya. Alberto Wambua is the executive director of the Gender Violence Recovery Center. Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Santisana, at 9:01. Good morning.
Latest news from around the world. 94.4. This is The Situation Room.